So, without further ado, that's our introductions done. I am going to open the first session, which is the sort of panel keynote. And to start that, I'm going to invite the project leads, so that's Tünde and Sam, to talk a bit about what they mean by multimodality in the higher education learning context. So, Tünde and Sam, could I open the floor up to you, please?
Thanks, Jenny, for the warm welcome, and welcome everybody. Thank you so much for taking your time from your busy schedule to join us. It's lovely to see such an international audience, which also matches our lovely project team, which we have got from various institutions and countries, which has been brilliant. And as Jenny said, would encourage everybody to seek out the SEDA funding, because it's been a great opportunity for us to explore multimodality in learning in higher education. So in terms of, I just wanted to briefly set the context of what we mean by multimodality in the context of our projects, because it can mean many things to many people. And this is what we found when we were trying to do our literature review as well. It's very hard to find a single definition, but we are coming at it from a semiotic or a meaning-making perspective. So our definition is when we talk about a multimodal communication on artifact, when we're talking about how we can combine more than one modal form of communication in the same artifact. So that typically would be an example of that would be an infographic where we combine images and text, but not just images and text, but even within that we might pay attention to the color choices, where we place things, and all those decisions and choices carry meaning. In fact, I think we could say that probably there's not much in our teaching practice that is not multimodal, because we always use a lot more resources for making meaning than just text, and which is why we're talking about beyond text as the name of our symposium. So and I think the interesting bit about multimodalities is how we create meaning that will be more than the sum of its parts, and that's how we transpose, combine and integrate different forms of meaning, whether it's image, sound, body, object and movement. So even as I'm talking now, I'm not necessarily using any resources, but I am using resources, my facial expressions, my gestures in explaining, and that sort of things is what we're talking about multimodal learning. And that can be at the hand of the educator. Us as teachers, we might use learning resources that we put together that are multimodal. We might create multimodal learning environment. I mean, we are in one with Zoom and images, and so any sort of technological environment we're talking about, Victor Lim talks about semiotic technologies that are multimodal itself. So why we might want to use multimodality? Oh yes, and I missed out the important bit. We get our students to either evaluate, interact with, explore, or express their learning through multimodal artifacts. So whether that's blogs, wikis, videos, posters, animations, and that sort of thing. So the opportunities are endless. Why we might do this? Because we want to deepen our students' understanding by reflecting on these choices that they make as they go about choosing their different forms of meaning making. We also do this because we can support all types of learners and make use of their diverse communication and academic backgrounds and draw on their personal strengths in expressing their language and knowledge. We also do this because it's quite an enjoyable and creative process, whether it's for our students or for ourselves as educators. And it has shown also multimodal learning to increase engagement. So that's probably enough to set the scene, and I'll pass on to Sam to talk a little bit about how we brought it together in our project.
Thanks, Tünde. Yeah. So hi, everybody, and thanks ever so much for the warm welcome from Jenny, from Tünde, and to everyone for coming along to the session today. We've got over 200 people on now, and I'm blown away by the number of people who've come along to this. It's fantastic to see. So yes, just to talk a little bit about the project, and the kind of purpose of this panel keynote is really to sort of set the scene for what we're trying to do as a project team, alongside kind of how we define multimodal teaching, learning and assessment. And we kind of had a conversation around the impact that generative AI might have on this form of teaching. So obviously we're talking about multimodality in the context of combining semiotic forms in order to produce more meaning than they would otherwise have done individually. So as Tünde said, text and image and gesture and sound and video and anything like that. And with AI being quite a powerful tool in order to produce this kind of content or these kinds of resources, we wondered what effect it might have on both the understanding of what multimodality is in a teaching, learning and assessment context, but also the way that it's kind of constructed and delivered and assessed and evaluated by teachers and by students, and the impact that it might have on outcomes and on kind of the practice of teaching itself. So the project is really kind of designed to explore how we're bringing generative AI and multimodal pedagogy together. With the ultimate aim of producing a guide for educational developers on incorporating generative AI into multimodal teaching, learning and assessment. And we're going to do that through the submission or the publication of a number of case studies that you'll hear about a little bit later on in the session, in the symposium today, because we've got some of our speakers. Some of our submitters, who've got ideas for case studies and things they've done with their students that use AI in multimodal contexts, and they're going to kind of share their findings and the sorts of things that they've been doing. We also designed a survey that we've distributed, and we'll be distributing that to the captive audience that we've got here today as well. So you'll get a link to our survey, which talks about multimodal pedagogy and what that kind of means to you and the kinds of things that you've been doing. And what we're also going to do is obviously, disseminate this as far and wide as possible. So what we're really interested in is to see how people are using generative AI, what kind of apps they're using, why they've selected those apps, why they're thinking about them in particular terms, what kinds of things they can do, what activities that they've got their students to do, and how effective they've been, etc. And we're also kind of approaching this from a sort of ethical, inclusive and sustainable perspective as well. So some of the questions that we're asking concern, why have you picked this app? How have you used it kind of ethically, sustainably, etc.? How are you kind of navigating those kind of questions at the same time as incorporating it into this form of teaching and learning? And the responses so far have been really good. I'm going to hand over very quickly to Nataša, who I think is going to talk a little bit more about the kinds of things that we've seen in this space as well. Is that okay, Nataša? Are you there?
Yes, yes.
You are. There you are. Hello.
Yes, I am. Thank you, sir. Okay, so I'll just talk a little bit about multimodality and also my own understanding that, of course, what I'm sharing today stems from my own work in multimodality. So I think that's my understanding that a lot of studies in multimodality focus on images. So that's why you will that's why you will hear a lot about generative AI in terms of image creation. So how generative AI creates images, and we know today that there are so many different generative AI tools and platforms that can create all sorts of like a wide array of different types and kinds of images, and to me that is fascinating, especially in relation to connecting those images with educational concepts across disciplines. So this is something that I have been working on for a while, looking at how different types of pictorial images such as photographs, illustrations, drawings, comics, how they connect to different types of concepts across discipline, and how we can use these different images for deep engagement, deep thinking, which to me is about deep reflection. It's about analysis or analytical thinking, creative and critical thinking. So this is just something to explain and to put into perspective when we think about multimodality. This is my first association is pictures, images, and reflective narratives and discussions that we can combine into multimodal discourse, into multimodal expression, multimodal artifacts. And this is something that will feature, I think, strongly today in the symposium. One reflection that I would like to share that is about some of the, I would say, challenges when it comes to applying multimodalities, that these kinds of activities, require careful preparation and a bit of time, which I still think is very worthwhile to invest time and plan a multimodal learning designs and activities. We can incorporate different types of modalities. Tünde was earlier referring to gestures, and which are something that we can see as we talk in videos, if we are talking about online learning, but also just in general, it's any resource that incorporates different types of modalities, such as audio. So videos are quite multimodal resources. And the challenge that I wanted to mention is about how we treat resources that are not text-driven, kind of language text-driven, because some people would also talk about, images as text. So how language-driven or linguistic text, how that, when we think about other than textual resources such as images, pictorial images or videos, how we actually use them so that they are not marginal in multimodal artifacts. I think that's one of the big questions. So do we actually analyze images, how we use image content and image analysis for reflection? I think that is probably an underexplored area, and we're still, developing that side of multimodal research. So that's what I wanted to share. And I think now with generative AI, the field has absolutely exploded, and there are so many opportunities. So that's why I suppose we have so many attendees, so many colleagues today with us, and it's great to see that. Welcome everyone. Yes, and that's where I'll stop and over to other colleagues in the team to share.
Thanks so much, Nataša. That was fascinating. Can I pass over to Peter, please, now? Peter Hartley, I think that you've got an example using Notebook you could tell us about.
Yes, thanks. I'll put in a quote which I found from a book by Verity Harding in 2024, where she said, "The future belongs to all of us. And when it comes to AI, issues at hand are too complex and integral to be left to traditional AI experts alone." And we always start, I've been working with Sue Beckingham, whom you'll see later, running webinars ever since ChatGPT exploded on us. And we always start with that quote, because this really is a technology that affects all of us in a way that previous technologies do not. And it's developing all the time. You mentioned Notebook, and we've got a session on that later on. I think only a few weeks ago, I did not think that I would be waking up in the morning, clutching my mobile phone and asking it about the latest government pronouncements on AI through the voice service. So that's one thing that I think is going to explode in terms of possible applications, possible implications over the next year. And the other thing, as I say, we'll have the session later on Google Notebook. Have you ever talked to one of your essays or one of your assignments or one of something that you have written? And that is now possible with Notebook, whereby you load, and Sue and I put some stuff in that we had written a few years ago, and it gave us back a 2-person podcast, including some comments in there that we didn't remember from what we had written. So it does actually put a particular slant on it. It's not just a straight paraphrase. And we now know that students are using it, staff are using it, but we don't think anybody knows what that actually means for any of us in terms of whether actually talking to something that you've written and seeing people and hearing people discuss it, what that does to our kind of cognitive processes is a complete mystery. So we see Notebook as an example of the way this technology could fundamentally change us. And of course, it's developed so fast. Only a few weeks ago, we got the facility to interrupt. So you can now join the podcast and talk to the AI podcasters, which is a very, very strange experience. Thank you.
Thanks, Peter. Again, a really fascinating example. So I'd really like to ask some of the panel to talk about some of their experiences or practices using generative AI in HE. So Dr. Lina Na, are you able to talk to us about how you've used AI agent as an intelligent TA to facilitate a group discussion?
Thank you, Jennie. Hey, Jennie. And hello. Yeah, I teach in digital education program, and I find it's quite challenging if I want to facilitate group discussion while I'm facing a large number of students. So that's why I explored and tried to use the AI TA, the teaching assistant, based on ChatGPT provided by our university to facilitate group discussion. And I find that students, they can talk to the AI as a peer and also interact with each other while in a group discussion. And in an afterwards interview with the students, they told us that the feeling of the human AI interaction is very surprising, because before they try this, they think that they have less confidence in the AI agent acting as a teaching assistant or the group member to facilitate the discussion. But after they tried this out, they gradually increased their confidence, especially for the open-ended questions, to stimulate deeper engagement. And also the AI agent can respond real time to all the students, simultaneously providing recommend relevant resources and reading materials, which is, of course, we have trained the AI agent in advance. It is not a general AI agent. So I think from the practical perspective, training and testing the AI agent before we put it into the class to facilitate students learning is really essential. That's my brief experience sharing, and we will also have a more deep conversation in the teaching channel. Thank you.
Fantastic, thank you so much. And I'd like to go to Sue Beckingham from Sheffield Hallam Uni, because you've done some work on using AI responsibly with sustainability and ethics. Could you tell us about that, Sue?
So Peter and I have put together an infographic, really. So the generative AI checklist, we've used the checklist, the letters of the checklist to provide prompts for teachers and students to discuss the use of generative AI, because it's really important that they go through that process to understand what the implications are of using it. So the idea of using an infographic and having that visual serves as a discussion point. You know, you can print those out, have the students discussing them on a table and then feeding back to the whole class. So that's been useful. And we've shared that with the Creative Commons license and put that on the National Teaching Repository so that other educators can download and use that. So I'm quite a big fan of multimodal approaches, and was really inspired with Tünde's Advanced HE practice guide, which is multimodal learning, helping practitioners turn their multimodal ideas into teaching practices, because it really kind of conceptualizes the things that I've been doing for a long time, perhaps more manually. So utilizing infographics, screencasts and things like that. But where the generative AI comes in is that it speeds up the process, because it can actually create some of the images. And I've also been inspired by Hazel Farrell, who's posted in the chat there. She loves using Napkin and Google LM, and that's the focus of my case study, which is in a session this afternoon. So looking at podcasts, but the use of infographics to visualize things and bring together points for students.
Thanks, Sue. Thanks very much. I look forward to your session later. And then we have Dr. Run Wen, who's going to talk to us about how they use Gen AI tools to enhance professional skills. Run.
Hi, Jenny. Thanks for the question. And I'd like to share my experience using generative AI in a particular model at our university. And it is called integrative learning, in which our students undertake internships at different settings. This could include educational technology companies or any educational institutions. And a lot of their job duties often involve tasks such as analyzing data or writing professional reports or writing for different purposes. I mean, our students are well prepared for academic writing, but often the times they feel struggle writing for the workplace-oriented tasks. For example, when they're writing for official documents or creating social media contents, they are less helpful and less trained for that. So in order to address this gap, we as module leaders kind of introduce and encourage our students to use generative AI tools. And there are tons of tools available to facilitate the writing tasks or the data analysis tasks. For example, for the paper writing, we introduced PaperPal or iFlyDocs or Kimi. And all these tools are available and they help our students kind of adjust their language and style to meet the professional needs. And same for the data analysis tools. And there are tons of tools. I won't give the name, but if you want to know more about it, I can put the name later in the chat. But these tools are super helpful in terms of helping our students interpreting and presenting the data in a way that are more accessible and practical for their workshop tasks. So to the end of the semester, and a lot of students reported that these tools are super helpful in terms of facilitating and guiding them in the writing and data analysis process. That's the end of my sharing. Thanks. Back to you, Jenny.
Thank you, Run. And now I'm going to go to Rob Lindsay from the University of Liverpool, who has been doing some work on AI literacy development in both staff and students. Rob.
Thanks, Jenny. Hello, everyone. What a lovely group and morning this is. Yeah, I was going to touch on first, actually, just the sort of custom GPTs that we're building at Liverpool. And Sam will come back to the literacy angle, because I think Malcolm's touched on it in the comments, the idea of student co-creation and getting them to understand why it is we're including certain resources, certain sources of information. And actually within generative AI, building these custom bots where we refine the actual knowledge models that then produce the output, which can be reformatted in different multi-modes, is as important almost as the actual output itself. So we want to work with students to consider what goes in, and that will then impact what comes out. And I think the Creative Commons Zero, that was an explosion of creativity where we have open educational resources. We can use things there how we want. We can repurpose, recreate, and as I've said, co-create. So what we're trying to do is sit with students in the development of custom bots and get them to talk us through what it would be useful for them to have. So in terms of the inclusion and diversity angle, we want them to be able to say, this would help me in this situation. I don't want it in a table. Can I do that? Can I ask for it as an image? Can I ask for it as a video? And I think where we are in terms of the multimedia, we're at that sort of image stage still, aren't we? The videos are coming. We'll soon be able to request, a high quality polished video. So Clive, I think you mentioned, what skills are going to be necessary in the future for that multimedia development. Will generative AI take that away from us? Well, I think that's one to sort of consider as we see where the technology goes. Sam, did you want to pick up on the literacy angle? Because I know we've done a lot of work around that as well.
Yeah, just very, very quickly. I think the most important, from the multimodal kind of perspective, I think you're right. We need to kind of think about how new forms of information are going to kind of get developed. And the Notebook LM example that I think is probably the most in vogue thing right now really kind of showcases this, because it sort of really highlights just how opaque some of these systems are in the way that they create some of their artifacts and how they actually work, and how they seem a little bit like wizardry, I think, to the sort of lay user. And it's our responsibility, I think, as a sector to help students and staff alike to kind of understand exactly what's going on, which can't be, it's not particularly easy when the processes behind a lot of these systems are so opaque and they have such an ethical dilemma around them, and they do have such a huge impact on the climate as well. So I think a lot of the work that we've been doing at Liverpool has been really kind of literacy first, exploring some of the apps, some of the implications that sort of surround them, where we can find any of their kind of privacy details, that sort of thing as well. But I am very conscious of time as well, so I'm going to hand back to Jennie. But thanks, Rob.
Thanks, Sam. That was really helpful. So going forward then, we've got a few minutes left. I wanted to give Tam and Sandy an opportunity to talk about where they're taking the project, if there's any sort of big questions that they want the audience to consider. What's next in the project?
Yeah, so I think today will be great because we've come together to share what people have been doing. In terms of the guide development, we're looking at analyzing the case studies that people have kindly submitted. I don't know if Nayiri, if you want to say a few words on that, maybe. And we are progressing by organizing focus groups. So we might come back to you with a request if anyone fancies joining as a participant. And the whole idea is that we consider together all those opportunities and challenges that these face, because I think based on what Rob just said about the literacy as well, I think at the end of the day, we don't want, we're not into it because we want AI to produce a pitch perfect solution. It's what we're interested in is about what the student learns along as a process. And I think that's what we need to hold at the foremost in our minds. I think that, and we're very fortunate. We've got student advisors appointed as well. So I think they will also bring a really important perspective to the project with their experiences. But Nayiri, I don't know if you wanted to touch on the case studies a little bit or on any of your experience.
Yeah, thank you. Just to say thank you so much to everybody who submitted a case study. So you've got a great selection that you will hear about in the next parts of the symposium in the different streams. We also have additional case studies as well that will be presented in the final guide. So that's all I'll say for now, but looking forward to meeting you in the teaching stream, which is the one that I'll be leading on, where we've got 4 case studies as well as the other streams as well. Where people will be presenting on their experiences of using Gen AI and multimodality.
Thanks, Nayiri. Thanks very much. So we've got a few minutes left. I'm going to open it up to the floor to see if there are any burning questions from our audience. I know there's been quite an active chat going on, so do keep that going and the team will be responding to questions in there. But was there any questions that the audience wanted to put to the team vocally?
I think while we're waiting, Jennie, I think that was a question of what theoretical underpinning is guiding our work. So I think if I can point to the work of Günter Kress and von Leven around the social semiotic approach, and then more recently, Cope and Kalantzis and Victor Lim in Hong Kong, Singapore. So they have been looking at multimodal grammar and a pedagogical meta language. So it's a way of analyzing multimodal artifact and how we can utilize those approaches to help our students work in these different modalities and genres to create meaning. So I think that's certainly one that kind of has inspired my understanding and my approach to multimodality. I don't know if anyone else wanted to add to that or if there's any other questions.
Can't see any hands up in the chat. I would encourage all of you to keep an eye on the chat. There's some fascinating stuff going on in there, and lots of people are suggesting resources and activities, etc., that may be of useful to us as a group. And I'm sure you're aware of the wider sort of mailing list and activities that the Generative AI Network get involved with. So it's extremely active, as active as this chat, with all these resources that are being available. I mean, I wanted to say a couple of words. It was interesting, very positive accolades for Gen I and multimodal coming out of the panel there, and some fantastic and very varied activities being undertaken. I was always also really interested in what Sam was talking about and Rob around the challenges that we have around staff development, student development, literacy. Time is another big thing for us all, of course, in higher education. And I was particularly interested in the climate comments after activities across the pond yesterday. And I think the renewed emphasis we may all need to have around climate. So hopefully there'll be opportunities to coming out in the subsequent sessions for us to be able to discuss some of those in relation to learning, teaching, and to assessment. So could we put in the chat, please, the links to the different sessions that we're going to have next? Because there will be 3. We've got, to see if I can get this up for you. Share. Okay, am I sharing my screen? I hope I am now. Looks like I am. So just another reminder that all of these sessions will be recorded. We have 3 different rooms that you can go to attend. Room 1 will be looking at teaching. I won't read all of those for you, but those are the different activities that will be happening in room 1. In room 2, they will be looking at learning, so things like storytelling, experimental practice, and introducing AI to first-year accounting. And then in room 3, we have assessment and feedback. And then we've got design guides for integration, AI and critical thinking, and a multimodal approach to unpacking a dissertation. So the links to those should be in the chat or definitely in your information pack. You will have a 5-minute break now and then be asked to get joined straight into one of those teaching rooms for the next session, which will last about 50 minutes.